Hello, and welcome back to Fluency Unlocked, the podcast that helps you master English and speak it with confidence. I'm your host, and today we're going to tackle one of the biggest obstacles standing between you and true fluency, the habit of translating word for word in your head. Have you ever been in this situation? You're trying to say something in English. In your mind, you carefully choose each word, translate it from your native language, and arrange it according to the grammar rules you've memorized. You say the sentence, and it's technically correct. The grammar is okay, the vocabulary is fine, but the native speaker you're talking to gives you a slightly confused look. Your sentence sounds stiff, unnatural, maybe even robotic. If that sounds familiar, it's because you're building sentences like you're building with individual tiny Lego bricks, one by one. It's slow, it's exhausting, and sometimes it just sounds off. But what if I told you that native speakers don't do that? They build with bigger, pre-assembled Lego pieces. Today, we're diving deep into the method that teaches you how to do just that. It's called chunking, and it is, without a doubt, the secret to thinking directly in English and speaking with natural, effortless flow. So, if you're ready to stop being a word-for-word translator and start being a fluent English speaker, you are in the right place. All right, let's dive in. So, what exactly is this chunking method? Let's get right to it. Basically, chunking is a learning strategy where you stop focusing on memorizing single, isolated words. Instead, you focus on learning and memorizing groups of words that naturally go together. These groups are what we call chunks. A chunk can be anything from a simple two-word pair to a whole phrase or sentence starter. Think about it. Chunks are everywhere. They are collocations, words that are best friends and are almost always seen together. For example, we say heavy rain, not strong rain. We make a decision, not do a decision. Phrasal verbs, those classic combinations like give up, look forward to, or run out of. Sentence frames, reusable sentence starters like, in my opinion, on the one hand, or the thing is. Idiomatic expressions like once in a blue moon or it's raining cats and dogs. Entire functional sentences. Could you please tell me where the bathroom is? You don't construct this sentence, you know it as a single unit. The Lego analogy I mentioned earlier is the perfect way to understand this. A beginner learner tries to build a sentence with individual word bricks. I think this is a good idea. A native speaker or a smart learner just grabs a pre-built chunk. I think this is a good idea. It's one unit, one piece. They don't think about the individual words, they think in phrases. Chunking trains your brain to see and store phrases as single pieces of meaning. It's a complete mindset shift, moving from a word-level view of English to a phrase-level view. Okay, so it's about learning phrases, but why is this so incredibly powerful? Why is it a secret to fluency? The benefits are profound, and they directly attack the root causes of slow, unnatural speech. First, and most obviously, chunking dramatically increases your fluency and speaking speed. When you speak, you have less to think about. Instead of your brain trying to find 6 different words and then organize them with grammar rules,
It only has to find one chunk. Your speech becomes smoother, faster, and more natural because your brain is pulling bigger, more efficient blocks of language. Second, your English will sound infinitely more natural. This is a huge one. Languages are full of collocations that aren't logical. They're just the way it is. Why do we pay attention but draw a conclusion? There's no grammar rule for that. By learning chunks, you automatically absorb these natural word pairings. You'll stop making those small but noticeable mistakes that mark you as a non-native speaker. You'll sound more like a real person and less like a textbook. Third, chunking is a backdoor to internalizing grammar without stress. Many learners hate studying complex grammar rules. Well, chunking allows you to absorb grammar in a natural, intuitive way. For example, instead of memorizing the rule, the verb enjoy is followed by a gerund, ing, you just learn the chunk, I enjoy watching movies. After you see a few more chunks like I enjoy reading and she enjoys listening to music, your brain automatically understands the pattern. You learn the grammar by using it in context, which is how we all learned our first language. And finally, it's a massive confidence booster. One of the biggest fears in speaking is not knowing how to start a sentence or getting stuck halfway through. When you have a mental library of sentence starters and useful phrases, that fear disappears. You always have a way to begin. If someone asks your opinion, you don't panic. You just pull out a chunk like, well, from my perspective, or if you ask me. This gives you a solid foundation to build the rest of your sentence on, making conversation far less intimidating. I can see you're getting excited about this, and you should be. So let's move from the why to the how. How do you actually start finding, learning, and using chunks in your daily practice? Let me give you a practical, step-by-step guide. Step 1. Change your mindset and become a chunk hunter. This is the foundation. From now on, whenever you listen to or read English, I want you to stop seeing individual words. Instead, I want you to activate your chunk radar. Pay attention to groups of words that seem to appear together often. When you hear a phrase that sounds really natural and fluent, that's a chunk. Your new job is to become a collector of these valuable phrases. Step 2. Find your chunks in the wild. The best chunks aren't in textbooks. They're in authentic English content. So where do you hunt for them? Podcasts and YouTube videos. These are gold mines. Listen to how native speakers express their opinions, tell stories, or explain things. TV shows and movies. Pay attention to conversational dialogue. How do characters greet each other? How do they agree or disagree? Books and articles. Look for recurring phrases and strong collocations that writers use. Whenever you hear or read a phrase and think, wow, that sounds so natural, pause and grab it. Step 3. Create a dedicated chunking notebook. This is your personal library of fluency. Don't just dump a long, messy list of phrases. Make it your personal toolkit. Organize it. I recommend a simple 3-column system, either in a physical notebook or a digital one like Notion or Google Docs. Column 1, the chunk. Write down the exact phrase. For example, on the tip of my tongue. Column 2, the meaning or context. Briefly explain what it means and, more importantly, when you would use it. For example, when you know a word but can't remember it right now. Column 3, your own example. This is the most important step. Create your own sentence using the chunk. This moves it from passive knowledge to active knowledge. For example, what was the name of that actor? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Step 4. Actively practice your chunks. A notebook full of chunks you never review is useless. You need to get them into your long-term memory. SRS systems. Use an app like Anki or Quizlet. But don't just put the chunk on the flashcard. On the front, write a situation or a prompt. For example, how to say you almost remember something. On the back, write the chunk. It's on the tip of my tongue. This forces you to retrieve the chunk based on a real-life situation. Speaking and writing practice. This is non-negotiable. Set a goal to use, say, 3 to 5 of your new chunks in a conversation or a piece of writing each day. The more you actively use a chunk, the more it becomes a natural part of your own speech.
Now, this method is powerful, but it's not magic. There are a few common mistakes that learners make that can slow down their progress. Let's talk about these traps so you can avoid them. The first trap is learning chunks that are too big or too specific. If you memorize a long, complicated sentence that can only be used in one very specific situation, it's not a very useful chunk. The best chunks are versatile and reusable, like Lego pieces you can use in many different creations. Focus on phrases that are 2 to 6 words long. By the way, it turns out that, as far as I know, these are perfect. The second and biggest trap is passive collecting. This is when you become a great chunk hunter, filling your notebook with hundreds of amazing phrases, but you never actually practice them. Your notebook becomes a graveyard of good intentions. Remember, the goal is not to have a big list. The goal is to be able to use these chunks in a real conversation without thinking. You must schedule time for active review and practice. The third mistake is ignoring grammar completely. While chunking is a fantastic way to internalize grammar naturally, it doesn't mean you should never look at a grammar rule again. Basic grammar knowledge is still helpful because it provides a framework. Chunking helps you see the patterns, and a little grammar study can help you understand why those patterns exist, allowing you to create your own correct sentences more freely. They work best together. Finally, the last trap is learning chunks without context. If you just download a list of 100 English idioms from the internet and memorize them, you won't know when, how, or if native speakers actually use them. Some idioms are old-fashioned or very informal. The best way to learn is by finding chunks in real content, because then you see exactly how they're used in a natural context. Context is king. Once you get comfortable with the basics of chunking, you can take it to the next level to accelerate your fluency even more. First, you can start creating situational chunk lists. Are you preparing for a job interview? Create a list of chunks specifically for answering common interview questions. For example, I'm a great fit for this role because, or one of my biggest strengths is, have an important meeting. Prepare chunks for expressing opinions, agreeing, and disagreeing politely. This targeted approach is incredibly effective. Next, focus on learning sentence frames. These are chunks with a blank space in them, which gives you incredible flexibility. For example, learn the frame, not only is it blank, but it's also blank. Now you can create hundreds of sophisticated sentences. Not only is this podcast informative, but it's also very motivating. Or, not only is the weather terrible, but it's also getting worse. Finally, work on upgrading your chunks. As you advance, you can start replacing simple, common chunks with more sophisticated or nuanced ones. Instead of always saying, I think, you could upgrade to, it seems to me that, or I'm of the opinion that, or as I see it. This adds variety and sophistication to your English. So, that is the power of chunking. It's the method that bridges the gap between knowing words and speaking fluently. It's the key to stopping the painful word-for-word translation process and starting to think and react directly in English. You stop being a student who is studying the language from the outside and start becoming a true user of the language from the inside. Your journey with this method requires a shift in perspective. It requires you to become an active, curious observer of the language around you. But the reward is nothing short of transformative. Imagine expressing your thoughts smoothly, naturally, and confidently, using phrases that roll off your tongue just as easily as they do in your native language. That is what the chunking method offers. So here is my challenge to you today. Don't just let this be an idea. Put it into action right now. Listen to this podcast episode again, but this time with your chunk radar on. Find just 3 to 5 chunks that I used that you think are useful. Write them down in your new chunking notebook, find their meaning, and write your own example sentence for each one. That's it. That's the first step. Thanks for tuning in to Fluency Unlocked. I'll see you in the next episode, and remember, fluency in English isn't a destination, it's a daily habit. So start today.